Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, so I was watching this episode earlier. It was like multiple episodes, but it's called Signs of a Psychopath. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's an A&E thing. Now, this guy, he preyed pretty much is what I'm going to say on vulnerable women. And he made it seem like it was their idea, their this, their that, whatever. Well, this one woman, she had clear signs of like mental health issues, and she had tried to commit suicide previously. Now, she obviously wasn't successful. But the days leading up to her disappearance, everything was going the way that she needed it to. She had a good job. She was um, meeting her dad. They went to visit her mom's grave. And that was the last day that anybody else has seen this woman alive. So they assumed that she had ended up taking her own life that following day or that evening, whatever. But she had never been found, and neither had her body or nothing like that. Now, um, a few years later goes by, and a few days later goes by, and her dad is starting to worry because, of course, he hasn't heard from her either. So when her dad goes to the apartment to try to find her and see where she's at, her iPhone's still there. Nothing seems to be at a miss. Well, a while later, I'd say probably they said a year after her disappearance, these guys were walking along this lake, and this happened overseas somewhere. And they were walking, and they found a BDSM mask and a ball gag and some other odd items that shouldn't be in the water where they were. Now, they had pulled the stuff out and left it on the side of the lake because they thought it was suspicious about where it was at, but they didn't know too much into it at that point. Well, they had went home, both of these men, and one of them said they just had this odd feeling that something wasn't right and that they needed to turn it in to the police. So he went back the next day, recovered the items, and took it and turned it in. Now, when he did this, he that was kind of the end of it at that point because there was nothing else to go on. Now, a little while later, this woman, she was walking her dogs on this guy's property that she's allowed to walk her animals on. And her dog runs off, which is unusual for it, and brings back a human bone. So then she follows the dog and she starts seeing all these human bones. So they go and contact the landowner, who also, in response, contacts the police. Now, they don't know who this woman or this person is at this point because it's only bones that are there. It was like a partial jawbone. It was a few vertebrae. They only recovered like 71 or 72 bones out of the whole human body. And it's because it'd been out there for so long that that was all that was left. And animals had scattered, pieces in different places. Now, after this discovery, they started trying to find out who these bones belonged to. Well, it took a while, and they finally discovered that it belonged to this lady who had had mental health issues in the past, but now they come to a crossroads, and they don't know whether this lady had been there, or like if she committed suicide to herself there, or if she was brought there after the fact. Now, we're sitting there, and the lady, they finally find out who she is. And they, after, bone discovery and all that kind of stuff, and doing DNA testing on the bones. So then they start looking into her history. They go back to her apartment. They collect like all her cell phone. They collect her iPad. They collect her computer. They collect all this stuff. Well, they start seeing how she's really getting into this BDSM stuff and these websites and all this kind of stuff. So they start looking more into that. Well, then the men, after hearing this, they go back to where they had found this stuff previous. But at this time, the water's so murky and all that stuff, they really can't see anything. So they just start kind of feeling around because they don't know what they're going to find. Well, they end up finding a set of keys that belonged to the missing lady's skeleton. It was her stuff and her name and everything that was on it. So they collect the rest of the stuff that they can find in that area. And they take it back. And then so that's how they connected like the mask, the keychain, all that kind of stuff to this lady. And the victim. Now, they also recover 2 cell phones. One, they've been in the water for over a year, so they didn't know really if they were going to be able to find any evidence on this or anything, if there was to be any hope because of they've been in the water for so long. But thankfully, were able to recover some text messages. On the phone, one was for a sir and one was for a slave. That's how they had the phones connected. Well, when they started doing these messages and reading them, they started seeing how deep this actually went. And at this point, they were almost sure this woman had been murdered. Now, the guy that they suspected, at first was like, no, I didn't do nothing. I didn't have nothing to do with it. Yada, yada, yada. You can't prove nothing. He was kind of cocky and made it seem like he just didn't do anything. Well, the messages started getting deeper and they started talking about how he wanted to knife somebody and watch them bleed to death, and how he wanted to SA someone as this was happening, and how it was a turn on and all this kind of stuff. Well, the slave phone that was found, she was writing messages back saying, I don't want to do that no more. I didn't like it. I want nothing to do with that. Please stop talking about that. Was also saying stuff along the lines of, this is not something that I want to be into. And all he kept responding with was, if you try to off yourself again, then I want to be the one to do it. You don't do it yourself, and all kinds of stuff. And like, he was making her feel like that was her only option. And he kept coming back with, well, you're ugly and nobody ever would want you. And like trying to make her want this, and like trying to make her mind feel like that she was making the decision for him to do this to her. Now, at this time, they still didn't exactly know who this person was, but eventually they do find out. And when they find out, it goes a lot worse than what it appeared. Now, after a certain amount of like investigation, they finally went back to the apartment because they found CCTV. And this guy that kept coming to visit this lady would cover his face because he knew where the surveillance cameras were. So obviously he'd been there way prior to this time period. Now, this had been going on for a long while, from what everybody understands. And they traced the phones back to a certain store, and they found out who he was based on the phones and where they were purchased and the trace and all that stuff. So that's how they ended up getting him, or finding out who he was. Now, this man was married and had 2 kids that was living under the same roof as this person. And his wife supposedly knew nothing about anything that was going on around this time. Now, she knew he had these like kinks, I guess is what you want to call them, and that he was into certain BDSM stuff, but she was too scared to do anything about it or to leave because obviously of the way that he talks about knives and all this other kind of situations and scenarios, it gets bad. Now, this lady from the United States also came in on this case and said that he um, messaged her and said that if he could get to the United States, he was going to find her, SA her, and also knife her to death. And that scared the lady to death because she even ended up receiving a postcard for Christmas from this man that she has never given her address to. So somehow he had found it, and that was his way of telling her, don't talk. And so that scared her to death. Well, and she ended up talking anyway, so it didn't really matter. And so did his wife. And he was like even telling the guards at this point, they're not going to get me. This is going to be something that I'm going to get away with. I'm going to go home and I'm going to have a steak and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. All while all this trial and everything was going on. Now, they ended up coming back that he had so many different people that he has said this to. And then he also told the woman in the United States that he had already murdered someone the same way he was wanting to murder her. And so, and he told the lady this victim's name. Now, it is a long, long process, and it is a long story. And it ended up being like 4 episodes, I think, and 9 different sessions for them. But then when they came back and found him guilty of this, he acted like, oh well, like he had no emotion through the whole trial, didn't show no remorse, didn't show that he even was sorry. Like the gratification he got from this was worth everything to him. He still tried to claim that he didn't do it, but with cell towers, the phone calls, the messages, and everything like starting to pile up against him. And so eventually, the cops decided they needed to go retake a look at this lady. And this is what really got like this down to, okay, yeah, this was a murder. They finally went back to her apartment, and her bed, when they took the sheets off of her bed, there were knife marks all in her bed, and there was some blood stains and everything all in her bed. So that's where he apparently had her, and then drove her body and took it somewhere else. Now, that's the weird part, though, because on CCTV, it didn't show the actual removing of this person. And when the day that this happened, which was on the 12th of, I can't even remember the month, but the 12th, he told her, and this was the final text messages between these 2 cell phones, to meet him at this part of the lake and don't bring her phone, don't do this. Like, she was under his spell completely by this point. And so they believed that that is the last time that anyone had ever seen her alive. And when he drove her, because at one point the detective said he thinks she was tied to a tree out there or bound to something in order to keep her still. And it was just a crazy, crazy situation. But it's definitely worth the watch. But if you have watched it, leave me a message and let me know what you thought. Because I just could not believe that a BDSM thing could turn into something this serious. And I get the whole having having kinks and all of that kind of stuff. I understand that. But what I don't get is what gives you the right to take somebody's life because of that kink. So I want to know what your thoughts about BDSM are, and tell me what you think about this case and get back to me. Bye.